What's up, everybody? My name's Big Cam and welcome back to another Comically Boston breakdown episode. And today we are talking about Alien Earth episode 7 titled Emergence. And something's emerging this episode in the penultimate episode of season 1 of Alien Earth. I'm not sure if there will be a second season, but there's only one episode left with the finale next week. And I say let's jump right on into it. I've been really enjoying the show so far, so let's just do a little previously on and then into the episode. But previously on Alien Earth, we saw that Wendy is figuring out the communication with the xenomorphs, but the one in the lab is getting bigger and bigger by the second. Boy Cavalier had a meeting with Yutani that didn't go well for her, and he arranged for $20 billion and 6 more weeks of quarantine, and then she and Morrow seemed to be setting something up to go get the xenomorphs themselves. So it might be a little bit of Yutani versus Prodigy in this final 2 episodes. The Teocellus is still in the goat, and that alien creature is getting more and more fascinating by the week. The alien bug fly creatures got Isaac last week, and he's now dead, or maybe possibly going to get rebooted, but they said that the technology for that isn't quite there yet. So poor Isaac's gone, or Toodles, whichever one you want to call him. But the bug creatures were able to escape their cells and, are now trapped in the lab, but slightly trapped Dr. Arthur in the lab, and he got face-huggered, but slightly took him through the air ducts back to his room, and, the bug creatures and Isaac were just left in the lab, and Slightly's on the run with Dr. Arthur in a face-hugger attached to him. That's kind of where we open up this episode. But of course, we open this penultimate episode of Alien Earth with the title card like every episode has, and we see a close-up of a xenomorph as we glide down from its big head through like its body. We see acid burns from its blood. We see shots of Isaac's face eaten by the bugs. We see, what happened to the poor doctor. We see the facehugger jumping on Arthur and slightly pulling him away, but it ends with the xenomorph's head and like his jaws, and then it goes right down to the tip of the tail of the xenomorph, right down to like the, the spiky tip, or the sharp tip. But we cut over to see Slightly looking at Arthur back in his room, and he's trying to like feed him like a drink. He's like, Arthur, you look hungry? Really? He's got a face-hugger on him. He looks hungry, so he like tries to move the alien a little bit and like stick a straw in there to feed him, but the face-hugger seems not to like that and tightens around his neck when Shmi comes to the door and Slightly tries to get him to go away by telling him that he's busy, but Shmi is like, we're never busy. You're being a shit. What are you doing in there? Let me in. And, he barges in and he sees that Arthur is under Slightly's bed with the creature on his face, and Slightly asks Shmi to help him and, to get Arthur to the beach and do what Morrow is asking him to do, and Shmi says yes, he'll help him, even though Shmi's just a little child at heart and he just doesn't know what's going on, and he's just like, I just want to be friends, and Slightly's the only one that will talk to me like a friend, but these two morons now are taking Arthur in this facehugger to Morrow and have to try and escape this facility without being seen. We then cut over to Kirsch arriving back at the lab, seeing the alien bug creatures are loose, and they send in a couple of containment guys to grab the bugs, and they kind of like zap prod them and then put them in these containers. And Kirsch is like, put the bugs back in their cell, retrieve the hybrid, clean him up, get him out of that cell, and put the creatures back in their lab, experiment boxes. And Kirsch tells Boy Cavalier that the alien bugs digest their food on the outside of their bodies because the bug creatures look slightly different from the last episode to this episode. And I was like, why'd they change? And this is the reason. They're digesting the creature that they're eating. They're digesting the food on the outside of their bodies. And he says that they must have been from a world where there wasn't much organic matter where they were from, so they must have ate minerals. And, they're like fascinating. But he's like, how are we on rebooting Isaac? And he goes, not promising technology. He goes, oh, well, that's a waste of $6 billion. No more kids in the lab. And he's like, what about Wendy? He goes, well, you'll have to watch her, but no more children in the lab, Boy says. But Kirsch is like, this wasn't just a careless accident. He just said, you said one of the children's got careless. And he goes, no, no, no. This is much different than just a child getting careless. And he shows him the footage of the goat, you know, headbutting the glass and distracting him, knowing that the goat wouldn't benefit for itself, but still knew that he was cooperating with this other species and trying to work against the human. And it was like, ooh, wow, like this creature is so advanced, and this blows Boy's mind. He's like, I gotta study him more. Bring him to my private quarters. Wendy then comes into the lab and she sees Isaac's body laying there dead, and they're trying to like just brush past it and cover it up, and they're like, we don't want the children, you know, to know about this. We don't want to scare them and make them feel like they're not safe. And Wendy's like, we're not safe. And they're like, Kirsch, talk to her. And she goes to leave, and they block the door, and she's like, let me leave, and they won't. So she makes an alien noise to communicate with the xenomorph, and the xenomorph starts headbutting the glass, and Boy's like, oh shit, and Wendy's like, you can't just erase things, and she leaves, and Boy's like, oh shit, where are the others? We have to get to them before she does. And Kirsch goes to look up where they are and finds out that Arthur has turned off their trackers. So hopefully Wendy will be able to get to the children before Boy does. We then cut over to Joe going to see Wendy, and she tells him that Isaac is dead, and he's like, I'm so sorry. And he's like, it's not safe here. We have to get out of here. And she's like, we can't with the trackers. But he tells her that Arthur turned off their trackers and all of their trackers. And he's like, we have to get out of here. But Wendy's like, I have to go back for the other kids. And he's like, no, we can't, we have to go. And she's like, you're my brother, you wouldn't leave without me, right? Well, now you know why I have to go back for the others. And he's like, okay, we'll go back for the others. So they go over to Nibs's room, and they're trying to get Nibs and Curly to come with them. But Nibs is still really messed up from the last conversation that Wendy and her had, and she's like not able to like really speak, and she's like all messed up still. But Wendy's able to convince her to come with them and get out of there, but Curly wants to stay. So Wendy says, promise me you won't tell them that we're leaving. And Curly says, I promise, but I was like, I have a feeling Curly's going to break this promise sooner rather than later. Guards then start to come around the corner, and Joe is like, we gotta go, but Wendy goes over to the screen and starts doing that weird technology power that she has, where she can like control other technology through the screen. And they were like, we didn't know she could do that, but Wendy can. And she opens the xenomorph container in the lab, and now the xenomorph is loose, causing chaos throughout the facility. And Joe's looking at the camera like, what did you just do? We then cut over to Boy going to the lady doctor, Arthur's wife, to ask her where her husband is. And she's like, you fired him yesterday. He's on a transport. But they have found out that he never made it to the plane. And they're like, so you're telling me you have no idea where he is? You have nothing to do with this? And she's like, no, I don't. And, you know, they tell her that he turned off the trackers, and Boy's looking at her all pissed when the secure lab alert goes off from the xenomorph escaping, and Boy just gets all angry and is starting to act more and more like a child throwing a fit. And Boy just looks at Kirsch and says, be useful. And he goes, okay. So Kirsch then goes and finds Slightly and Shmee and catches them moving Arthur's body, and they're like panicking, like they're about to get caught by like the principal. But Kirsch already knows all about Slightly and what Morrow's been telling him, and that he's been talking to him in his head. He's like, I know all of that. And as he like says he knows all of that, Slightly's like, oh God. Like, it almost reminded me of like when my mother found out I smoked weed. Like, she like, you know, I come home one night in high school and she's like, you smell like weed. Did you smoke weed? And I'm like, yes. You know, like I was just so done with hiding it. I was just ready to embrace the fact of myself, you know. And then the moment she found out, it was like this weight came off my shoulders. And then I found out that she also does. So I was like, oh, my mom's cool, you know, like, and we're much more alike than I even thought. You know, growing up, I always thought me and my mother were very similar. And then once I became an adult, we are very much so similar. We have much more in common than we do different, you know. Shout out moms, love moms. But so Kirsch helps Slightly and Shmee and says, you guys are going the wrong way. The quickest way to get to the beach is take the service elevator. Tells them which floor to go, and they're like, why is he helping us? And I was thinking the same thing. I was like, why would he help them bring the body to Morrow? But we find out why Kirsch would do this a little bit later. Joe, Wendy, and Nibs are then making their escape through the forest when they come across these gravestones and tombstones that have all the kids' names on it. And Nibs runs over and is like, wait, that's my name, Rose Ellis, that's what they called me before. And Joe clears the brush away from Marcy's tombstone and just kind of like, you know, tidies it up, remembering his sister. And Wendy says, it's not us, we're still here. And Nibs is like, I don't think I am anymore. So interesting topic. Do you think Marcy or Wendy with her brain in this new body is still Marcy? Or is she now Wendy? Is she a new person entirely? And, you know, she's not the person she was because she has this new body, but is her brain her soul? Right? Because it seems like Wendy has her soul with her brain, you know what I mean? Like her brain brought her personality and everything with it, where like Nibs seems like maybe her soul was left with the other body and they just put this new brain in the other body, but it's not adapting as well to this like new vessel, you know? So it's a very interesting question. Is Marcy Wendy? You know, is she still the same person? Is she a new person entirely? I think Wendy is Marcy, you know, and vice versa. But in Nibs' case, you know, Nibs is a completely new person. Rose Ellis is completely dead, you know, and it's an interesting topic and you know, interesting subject though. Comment below your thoughts. You know, if you put your brain and consciousness into a robot synthetic body, is that still you? Or is it something else entirely? And your old body would then die. Comment below your thoughts. But Joe sees patrolling troops in the jungle and says they have to go. So we cut over to Slightly and Shmee, you know, also in the jungle, hiding from a patrol. And the patrol goes by and they turn around to see that Arthur's body is just gone. And they're like, what the hell, where'd it go? And I was like, oh God, somebody took him? Somebody snuck up on him? But they're looking around trying to figure out where he is, and the face hugger that was on Arthur drops out of the tree above and lands on Shmee, and he like, ah! You know, like a snake falling out of a tree. He freaked out. But they turn around to see Arthur awake, but he has no memory of what happened before this incident. And they convince Arthur to come with them, and Arthur's like, thank you, I think you saved my life. And Slightly's like, you're welcome. And this like awkward pause, and Slightly is thinking like, did I really save this guy's life or did I kill him? I don't know what's going on. Like, and he's just this kid, but he's like, God, what was on your face? I think you're okay. Okay, Moro told me you'd be fine. Oh, Moro's such a bad guy. And, you know, he's doing all of this because, you know, hopefully Moro didn't kill his family, but I'm thinking Moro certainly did kill his mother and his entire family and is just tricking poor Slightly. But as they are walking on the beach towards the meeting point with Moro, Arthur starts to slowly remember that he got face-huggered and what happened to him in the lab. And he says, whatever it is you guys are doing, you don't have to do it. And Slightly and Shmee are like, we're bringing you to your wife. And he says, yes, but children don't know how to lie. And I don't know what the lie is, but I can tell that you two are scared. And they're like, we're not scared. And Arthur's like, that's the thing about lying. Once you do it, you gotta keep doing it. And you do it because you think I won't understand. But that's the thing. The ones that love you, they will understand. So we can go back. You guys can explain what's going on here. And I promise you, I'll help. And he's just such a good guy, and being like an actual father figure with his wife to these children, and they genuinely care about the kids. And as Arthur grabs their hands and starts to walk back with them, he says, everything's gonna be okay. And right at this moment, the chest burster starts to break out of his chest and, you know, pops out of his chest, and blood's all over Slightly and Shmee, and they witness the whole thing happen. And then the second now chest burster xenomorph starts slithering away, and Shmee loses it, and he's like, God, that's what Moro wanted. Oh God, he didn't tell me he was gonna come out. Oh God, you know, he's freaking out, and then he just starts to drag Arthur's bodies away, and Shmee's sitting there like, I only agreed to help because you said he would be okay. And Slightly's dragging him away, and he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, we're gonna be late. You know, it was one of the funniest scenes of this episode. And I see people on Twitter and shit being like, oh my God, Alien Earth is so dumb. What is dumb about it? You know, are you not liking the dialogue that is adults being children? Well, fuck off. Like, what do you expect? These children to be put into these synthetic body and all of a sudden they're super geniuses and they're talking all proper and they're just like Kirsch? Like, no. they're characters for the reason. I really, sure, it's dumb, but it's also what being the characters. I think it's properly written. I don't think it's dumb for being the sake of dumb. I think it's dumb because we're looking at children trying to be adults, and that's why everything's going wrong, like, people always miss the point. They always like to see the problem that they see, and then that's the only thing they see, and that's what they like to comment about. They don't see the bigger fucking picture. Like, it's crazy. People are so dumb on the internet. We then cut over to Curly going to the female doctor and, curling up into a ball in her arms and crying and saying everything's hard and I don't know what to do. And she says, the doctor says, everything will be okay, I promise. So Curly here didn't snitch right away like I thought she would, but the promise she made to Wendy is weighing on her very heavily. And she's like, what, do I do the right thing? Do I keep a promise? She's crying. It's like, oh God, what a pussy. But, also, you feel for the little kid. You're like, ah, God, she'll eventually tell them next episode or something and get them caught all over again. We then see Schleitley and Shmi are dragging Arthur's body on a raft through the water when Morrow and a team of Yutani guys pops up out of the water. And Schleitley starts pleading with Morrow and, like, I did everything you said. The thing popped out of his chest and left. Like, I did everything I could. And he goes, if you did that, then I wouldn't be standing over an empty husk of a body, like corpse. And Morrow tells Schleitley to shut up and stop acting like a child. You know what adults do when they make mistakes? They own up to it. And they just leave Arthur's body in the water to sink and drown in the water. And Morrow says to the comms, target 1 failed, on to target 2. So I don't know who target 2 is. Maybe Wendy, maybe the other, children. But the first target was Schleitley in these organism that was in Arthur, and now they're trying to go track that down. We then cut back to Boy Cavalier in his office, room, and he's looking at the goat that he had brought to his room, and he wants to talk to it. So he writes on his hand 3.14, and this is pi, and he says any advanced civilization would know what pi is. So what are the next 3 digits? And the next 3 digits would be 3.14159, I believe. So the goat stomps once, and then he goes, what's the next digit? And it stomps 5 times, and he goes, in the next. And I was like, oh my God, is this thing about to stomp 9 times? And we're going to have to listen to it all over again, stomp 9 times? But the goat just shits on the floor. And I was like, oh, 3.1415. Like, big old douche right on the friggin' door and the goat was making goat laughing noises, in his face. And Boy is sitting there like, this is amazing. This creature is so advancing, and only if he could speak and actually communicate and talk. And he goes, oh wait, that's a great idea. We should switch it into a human so it can speak. Which we did see it in a human in that one flashback episode of the Maginot crashing. And it was in that Shamil, engineer guy for the ship, and it was in his eye, and it did speak, but it didn't speak human, like we didn't see it go, hey, what's up? It just went, oh, and then it mating called this xenomorph to come at it and fight, and the T.S. Ellis was not afraid of the xenomorph whatsoever, was willing to fight that thing to the death. And I don't know, I might have the T.S. Ellis over the aliens. Like I said previously in my other breakdown videos, the T.S. Ellis is way scarier than the xenomorphs ever have been. But Boy here says we should switch it into a human so it can speak. And he goes, maybe we should switch it into like a mold scraper, somebody dumb, so we can see how advanced it is and how different it is. But he goes, oh wait, I know exactly who. But who is he going to switch into this T.S. Ellis? Maybe Joe? Because we then switch over to Wendy, Joe, and Nibs walking through the jungle when Wendy hears something, and Morrow's second team pops out of the tall grass, and Wendy tells them to back off and that they don't want to do this, but they don't. So she signals to the xenomorph from the lab to jump out of the trees and take care of this entire team, and it wipes out everyone, blood everywhere. And then it's like gonna crawl over to Wendy, and Joe's like trying to hold her back, and she's like, oh, let me do it. Let me talk to it. So she, crawls up to Wendy, and she like wipes blood off of its face. And then she says something to it, and Joe's like, what did you say? And she says, hide and follow, I think. So she's just got like this xenomorph hiding in the trees, just waiting and following them just in case something goes wrong and she can signal it. And I was like, oh my god, she's smart as fuck. But also terrifying that like this synthetic can control a xenomorph. At least it looks like it. We then see the baby xenomorph that's kind of like a snake-like creature that just came out of Arthur's chest, gets captured, you know, in a net. And Morrow and his team bring Slightly and Shmi right in the building and just kind of walk right in the front door. And I was like, huh, they're walking in like nothing, nobody's there. And then all of a sudden Kirsch and a team of guys pop out and surround them. And Kirsch has got much more guys than Morrow brought, so they're able to like easily surround them. So Kirsch has been one step ahead of Morrow this whole time, and this is what Kirsch wanted. He wanted Morrow to bring himself right to him so that he could just arrest him right there and didn't have to go chase him down type shit. And we see Kirsch was the one that captured the xenomorph baby as well. And he says, finders keepers. No one likes a sore loser. You know, and he's face to face with Morrow. And Kirsch tells Slightly and Shmi, come back over here, boys. And they walk over to Prodigy side of things. And Morrow looks at Kirsch and says, this isn't over. And Kirsch says, nothing ever is. And he tells the boys, you two are grounded. We then see Joe, Wendy, and Nibs made it over to the docks and they board a Prodigy Corp boat. And when they go to start the boat, they go to open the door and we see Joe's little girlfriend there comes out and she's like, I knew he would be here, and a bunch of Prodigy troops surround them. And she's like, what the hell, man? I told you not to do this shit, and like we were getting paid and shit. And he's like, I gotta get out of here. Please let us go. And their orders are not to shoot because they have to bring back the merchandise undamaged. And Nibs turns around and looks at the guy that says this and says, Mr. Strawberry, which is her little stuffed animal, says, fuck off, we're never going back. And the guard throws her little Mr. Strawberry in the water and she says, I see you, and grabs his chin and rips his jaw right out of his face. And they like held the shot of her holding his jaw with just like blood and like little strands of muscle and skin fibers just in her hand. They kept cutting back to it. I go, dude, they showed that way longer than they needed to. Like, we got the picture that she ripped out this guy's jaw. She didn't need to just hold it and just kind of like look around like, do you see the jaw that I just ripped out of this guy's face? Like, such a brutal, brutal way to go. But synthetics are strong, even the little girls. So she ripped that guy's face out of his chest. And then they start to fight for it. And Wendy goes to signal the xenomorph, but Joe like grabs her and goes, no, no, stop, please don't. When Joe's little girlfriend there starts to open fire at Wendy and, you know, hits Nibs twice. And then Joe, you know, sees Nibs like heading, you know, changing direction, heading towards his girl. And Joe shoots Nibs with the electricity gun, seemingly killing her. And Wendy turns around and looks at Joe and says, what did you do? What did you do? And like screams at him as it goes into credits, as like the xenomorph we see is like looking in the trees waiting for orders from Wendy. So I was sitting there like, oh my god, credits from this week. But I'm guessing next week Wendy's going to signal the xenomorph and then he's going to come in, wipe out all of the Prodigy troops, and Wendy will leave Joe behind for taking out Nibs and her friend, you know. So just one more episode with the finale next week, and I am so excited for it. Alien Earth so far has been really good. I mean, not like the best show I've ever seen, but like just a nice change of pace. Where like we haven't had a horror show in a while like this, where like it's spooky, but there's not such craziness going on that you need to like pay attention to every little detail that's going on. But if you do, there's like this sick story going on here with the different aliens and the different people, and I really love the characters in the show. I've loved through the whole series. I mean, Morrow and Kirsch and Wendy and Joe and even Nibs and Curly, and all of them have now grown on me so much. I really want to see what happens to Boy Cavalier. I really hope the Teocellus rips Boy Cavalier's eyeball out of his head and really messes him up. But I also had a theory that this season ends with the rest of the world, or maybe even Prodigy themselves, bombing Neverland Island to make sure that the aliens on Earth never escape this island and keep spreading, you know, that type of shit. So maybe that's still the case, or maybe not. Maybe next episode just, kind of leaves it vague so that they can do a season 2, and then maybe season 2 ends like that. Who knows? But I'm thinking this season is coming to an end and it will just be a 1-season type of thing. But it's almost been like an 8-hour alien movie. Granted, this episode was a little bit shorter, the last episode was a little bit shorter, but you get my point. They're hour-long episodes, 8 episodes, instead of a 2-hour alien film, we're getting more like an 8-part alien film, and it's been really good. I really like to see what Hawley did with this, and for some reason, Hulu didn't show me the trailer for next week, so I don't know what the teaser is for the finale, but I'm sure it's going to be real good, and 1 episode left, so comment below your thoughts. What do you think's going to happen in the finale next week? And if you want to talk more Alien Earth with me, links for those down in the descriptions below. Big Cam, 2 G's in the Big, pretty much anywhere. Just look for my face and you'll find me. And if you made it this far in the video and you would like to support the channel, the best way to do that is liking this video, commenting down in the comment section below, subscribing if you haven't already, and hitting that bell so you don't miss next week's Alien Earth video and you get the notification when it comes out. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you beautiful people in the next episode. Peace!